Hello and welcome to Wild Vittles. This episode, we're going to do green chili stew. And I'm going to get started cooking and I'm going to explain how did I come up with this. So we're going to start, I'm using a heavy cast iron, enamel cast iron, 6.5 quart pot. I'm supposed to put in a tablespoon of oil, to which I'm not going to measure that. I'm going to eyeball that. Because I feel like that is a rite of passage for somebody that the more you cook, the more you ought to be able to eyeball things. And it's also kind of an admonition that unless you're baking, a lot of the cooking is not an exact science. Now, if you're baking, it's important. So I'm getting that oil hot, and we're cooking today with some elk. This is an elk roast, a sirloin elk roast. And so I've already chopped it up into kind of 1x1 cubes. And I've salted it heavily. Heavily? Yeah, I guess heavily. Generously. And I need to brown it. A big part of this recipe is ensuring that your meat is browned and that even your onions are a little bit browned. I am using as a base recipe Hank Shaw's green chili stew. I've got the printout right here with me, so I can refer to it. But I'm adding a few things that he didn't. He has meat, peppers, and the chilies, and potatoes, and then some seasoning. I'm going to put in, and he has field corn. Well, I don't even know what field corn is, but it's some sort of rendition you'll get more often in Mexico. I'm going to put in tomatoes and sweet corn. Oh, and there's onions in it as well. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this elk meat, and it's a top sirloin. I've cubed it up, and I'm going to dust it with flour, and then I'm going to put it into the pan and brown it. And, if Hank Shaw goes to great pains to say something, you ought to listen, because there's a reason. And so he's imparted in his recipe that it's important that you get this meat browned and that you get, thoroughly, and that you also take your time with the onions and get those. He says brown, so we'll see. And he's actually got a video that I've watched. And he says you could take 30 minutes doing this. Now, I will not talk to you for 30 minutes just doing the first part of this. I may need to put more oil in there, because I was expecting more of a sizzle than I got. That's a bit of a hint of the way that I do recipes. Hold on a second, we're going to put this in here, because I think you're going to need a little bit of oil to facilitate this browning. I don't just get a recipe and then cook. I'll get a recipe out of a book or online, and I'll look at another one, and I'll look at another one, and then I will watch. This drives my wife crazy. I'll watch like 5 videos about it and try to capture what I think are the best ideas of all of them. Because, I think a little bit of it, and I'm going to great pains to put this in. You might think, Chris, why are you just like carefully plucking each one of these out of the flour and putting it into the pan? Again, Hank's direction was do not let these touch. And I think what he's trying to make sure is that you don't get them all bunched up and then they steam. Because sometimes when you put meat in all together, it doesn't really brown. And it's imperative we get these browned. Hopefully I don't not pay attention to what I'm doing and get burned in the process. But yes, I look at a lot of recipes and watch videos on them before I'll check something on myself. I'd like to tell you that everything I do is like inspired, or my great grandmother taught me all of this, or I learn a lot from books and probably disproportionately from videos. It's the age that we live in, right? So you got to use the tools that you have available to you. And why is that? Why does everybody have a little? Well, a lot of these recipes, I think this is my own theory. A lot of these recipes originated from somewhere, and then somebody else wanted to do one and call it their own, so they tweaked it slightly, right? Change one ingredient, change a time, change a temperature, have a variant of it to make it their own. And, there's things that I like and there's things that I don't like, so I'm cherry picking those things that I like. Now, how did I come to decide that I wanted to do green chili stew? This probably isn't the ideal time of year if you're going to use fresh hatch green chilies. And that's okay, because I was wandering around H-E-B, and if you're not from Texas and you don't know what H-E-B is an awesome grocery store. And in our grocery store is just a tremendous amount of choice. There is just a little bit of everything and a lot of good Tex-Mex stuff. And I came across this 505 Southwestern flame roasted Hatch Valley green chili, a jar, 16-ounce jar of roasted chilies. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I've not seen this before. I've seen them in little cans, but I've never seen a big jar like this. I would like to find a recipe to utilize this. Now, as I went and did a bunch of research, I realized then you don't necessarily have to have just hatch chilies. It could be any other chili that would have been like in season, and then you could have like roasted it. Could have been poblanos, bell peppers, anything like that. Well, this is looking really good. I'm starting to turn the meat that I browned, and I'm realizing now that Hank said I need to get a bowl to put that meat in. I might put it on the lid of my enameled. So I'm trying to get all the sides brown, and I think it's been long enough on one side, so I'm trying to turn it. And this is going to take some time to do, but it's kind of an upfront investment. So H-E-B, as I was saying, sorry I got distracted, is just a really great grocery store in Texas. And I'm sure regionally there are other really great grocery stores that have a lot of variety. But if you don't know, because maybe you're from the Northeast or something, Hatch chilies come from New Mexico. I think there's a town, Hatch. I should know that. I should look these things up before I go online or go on a podcast. But there's no script on this. This is all from the hip. There's a town, I think, called Hatch, and they have chilies there. And it's Hatch chilies. And they have big festivals, and they roast them. And so there's a seasonal thing, hence the jars. I know I saw some videos of some people that went to that and bought, like a large amount of chilies, and they roasted them, then they freeze them, and they use them throughout the year, like I'm doing here with these jarred chilies. So it's as if I went to New Mexico and made a purchase myself. All right, this is looking really good and brown. I'm just really happy with this, and I'm getting to use my fancy La Crusade enamel. This was a gift from my wife, and I'm really excited to have kind of a high quality enamel cookware. I hadn't done it before because the price, but I guess she figured Christmas and something I'm going to use, and I use it a lot. So for those of you on video, you can see I do this video and audio, getting them really good and browned over here. I'm going to throw those onto the lid because I don't want them to burn. The smell is fantastic. Now, this elk meat is a little older. I used up nearly all of my 2022 bull, and this is what's left of the roast, and kind of a testament to how I use my meat. Completely out of ground, completely out of steaks, but I had a couple roasts left. So that's also part of the selection process of why I was choosing to do a stew. And there was a cold front that came through, and it was in the 40s. So I thought, man, this is stew weather if I've ever seen it. And I like to try Southwest stuff, there's some people probably that are like have an affinity for Asian dishes. I have an affinity for Mexican, Spanish, probably Italian. Oh, that looks so good. And there's restaurants I like to go to, like if you're from Texas, there is a chain of restaurants called Chuy's, and they will often have hatch chili dishes during season. And then even HEB they'll bring fresh hatch chilies around. And so anyway, yeah, it piqued my interest. We're getting a lot of good fond on the bottom of this pan too that we're going to have to deglaze as well. So really excited about that. I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I'm dusting these in flour after I salted them. And I think that just kind of helps with the crust, which is going to impart into the stew itself. I've got to believe that there's some flour that'll be left over at the bottom of the pan, which will help as kind of a thickening agent. So yeah, I'm doing this stew because I had the meat, I found a cool ingredient, the hatch green chilies, and it kind of reminded me of stew weather when this cold front blew in. I hope you can't hear my dog. I've got him outside, and every time a bicycle goes by, he feels like he has to protect the home from that bicyclist, and he's doing a hell of a job right now. Good job, Rowan. I'm going to go ahead and put in the onions too. Put them on this other side. So now we're going to brown the onions. I've never heard brown. I've heard saute, cook until soft, that sort of thing, but never brown. And it's supposed to be 2 cups of onions, and I did not measure the onions. This was kind of an orphan onion. I went to the grocery store, and I know this happens, and nobody's like doing this on purpose, but I went to the grocery store and I bought several things for ingredients, and I bought a bag of sweet onions in a bag. I got home and I had a huge, like big as an infant's head, yellow onion. And I'm like, where the hell did that come from? And I think the guy in front of me had it. I think that the checker or the bagger at the grocery store accidentally gave me his onion, because I think they put it in a sack and didn't see it, and then they didn't give it to him. And then he went to check me out and bag me. They threw it in my stuff, which is fun. It's interesting. So I used my onion that was gifted to me. Like I said, it was huge, and it made all of this, which looks like it's every bit of 2 cups, maybe a little bit more. Well, I forgot. I had everything prepped, and then I forgot about my garlic. And normally, I cheat, and I've got garlic that's already diced, and it's in a jar, and I don't have enough. So luckily, I have some fresh cloves, so I'm going to have to do this old school. Cut these up. All right, this is where I begin to worry, because some of this fond is burnt. So the interesting question is, will it taste burnt? First time through, All right, I think all that is good. I'm going to let that cook. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put some broth in here to help deglaze this. I'm going to put this whole quart in. And it says to maybe put another quart of water, but I'll see where we get on that. Pardon me while I go yell at my dogs. All right. I need to put the cumin and the oregano in. It wouldn't be a Mexican dish if you didn't have cumin. And this one says a whole tablespoon. Yeah, a whole tablespoon of cumin. That is a lot. Ooh, I put a little bit too much in there. There we go. This cumin is pretty strong. Yeah, this is why I don't bake much, because I'm a little messy. And, you know, I do strive for perfection in most of the things that I do, but when it comes to cooking, my measurements, I'm generally under time pressure, and so my measurements aren't always awesome. This is Mexican oregano, so it's kind of a two-step process because it's got full leaves on it. So you got to kind of grind it up with your hand, at least so I believe. It's kind of like putting it in a mortar and pestle, which I don't have. Grind it up. Got a terrific smell to it. I'm going to have to clean my station here. If I were working in a restaurant, they would be like, really? How much of a mess could you make? All right, we've got our cumin and our oregano in. So I'm going to go ahead and put in, this is not in Hank's recipe, but tomatoes. And so we were making sandwiches the other day, and we had a mega tomato, and I had some of that left over. I grabbed 2 more aromas. So this is kind of like 2.5 tomatoes diced. And I'm going to put that in there. Maybe regretted decision, I don't know. But I'm going to freelance this and put it in my stew, and I like tomatoes, so there you go. You can put in, this recipe calls for a pound, and this is a pound. That smells good. And it's supposed to be chopped, and I think they're chopped. I think. Let me pour these in here, and yeah, they're chopped. Never used it before, but you can see it looks pretty awesome. So those are roasted, chopped up, a little bit of seeds in them, not too much. And the way Hank explains it is, if you want your chilies to like disappear, then put them in now. If you want them to be seen, then put them in at the end. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some in now and some in at the end. And these are medium heat, so I'm hoping that this will be a spicy dish. So I'm going to go, do I want to try all of that or not? I think I want to try all that. We'll play it by ear. So still got potatoes to put in and corn. I'm going to wait to do the potatoes until later because they'll kind of evaporate into nothing. I need to get this up to a boil. Okay, so we've added in the tomatoes, the chilies. It was like a pound of chilies. Garlic, onions, cumin, oregano, and the meat. And so now I just got to get it up to temp and let it simmer. And it says an hour for pork, 3 hours for an old deer. This was a fairly young bull. He was a 5-point. I don't think it'll be tough, but you know. So I'm going to watch it. I'll probably check it at 2 hours. And we're going to take a break while this gets up to temp and simmers. And I'm going to wash my potatoes and get those cut so that we're ready for the next step. So hang in there with me. It'll take like that for you. For me, it's going to be probably an hour or two. And we'll come back and we'll talk about what's next. Okay, welcome back. We are not done, but we're going to add in the potatoes. It's been about 2 hours, just about. And it's looking pretty good. I've already actually opened this up while I was stirring it periodically and took a taste. And prior to this, I put a pound, 1 whole jar of medium heat Hatch green chilies in there. And generally medium is pretty hot for me. I like hot stuff, but medium's hot. So tried it with a spoon and it's like, it's pretty spicy. So I don't think I'm going to put any more green chilies in there. It's getting the intended impact. I'm going to put in the potatoes now for kind of the last hour. Don't really know because I've not done this before, kind of how this will react, but I may have cut them a little bit small. And the way that Hank actually says in his recipe, he's like, cook it for 3 hours and then put in the potatoes. And I want the potatoes to cook a little bit longer because I like them to be pretty soft and fall apart. This is my preference, and I know why he's doing what he does as well. So I've kind of diced his conveys that it's really small. It's not. I cut them in half, and then I cut them kind of in thirds or quarters, and cut those in half. So I guess you kind of got chunks of quarters of very small. And these are, I was looking for Yukon Gold, and I found white potatoes that look like Yukon Golds. I don't know if they were mislabeled or what at the grocery store. So I'm going to try to put this in now so I don't splash myself, because the liquid is screaming hot as it's been simmering for 2 hours. And one note too, if you want to, like, if you're following along with Hank's recipe, which I'll put in the show notes, he indicated that you should put in a quart of broth and then potentially another quart of water. I did not put any additional water in. I'm glad I didn't, because I'm about 2 inches from the top of my 6.5 quart enamel Dutch oven, and I would not want it to be more than that. I'm also, again, not in Hank's recipe, I'm going to put in corn, sweet corn in this. He has field corn in his, which is some sort of a dried corn that you have to like reconstitute and cook. But I'm going to put in sweet corn, so just a can of that. I drained it. And I don't know if a whole can will be about right. I'm going to pour in about half and kind of look and see how that looks. And, like I was saying earlier, I check a lot of different recipes, and the other recipes had tomatoes. They made reference to putting corn in it. I'm going to go ahead and put the whole thing in there. I'd rather do that than toss it. Okay, put the whole can in there. We're experimenting. It says at the end to add pepper and hot sauce to taste, to which I thought I was going to have to put some hot sauce to give us a kick, but I don't think it's going to need a kick the way that it's running thus far. I may need to turn it up a little bit with since I put in potatoes that are room temperature and some corn that's room temperature. But it's been cooking pretty well. And it's coming along, smells great. Really impressed with the taste on that little bit that I tried. I'm pumped. Looking forward to dinner time. And this is something I'm sure all stews, they're better the second day. So almost there. I'm going to give it another hour, and then I'm going to kind of check the tenderness, and hopefully at that point we'll be done and it'll be dinner time. So be right back. Welcome back, and time has passed, and let's take a look at it. Looks pretty good. I did before turning on the camera and the audio, I did test it, and the potatoes are done. And so in total, I've kind of deviated from what the recipe said. The recipe said cook the venison for 3 hours, then put in the potatoes. And I was trying to land this where I'll have dinner a little bit earlier because I started a little later. So I cooked it for 2 hours and then put the potatoes in. The potatoes are done. And the corn was ready to go. The meat is now been cooked for 3 hours and it's pretty tender. I also kind of taste tested it. I think I mentioned when I was putting the potatoes in, and the broth is spicy. So I had originally planned to put more chilies in, but I'm not going to do that because I'm afraid I'm going to end up with too spicy a dish. And I think it's just about perfect right now. So real meat and potatoes type meal. So you can see it's real chunky from perspective of the potatoes. I was worried that I made the potatoes too small, but I think that looks like a good amount, actually. So kind of a very basic stew. extremely hot. So I'm going to get kind of a bite that's got a little potato and maybe a small piece of meat and a little bit of green peppers in there if I can kind of strike the balance. Looks really good. So let me taste test this real quick without burning my mouth because it's nuclear hot, man. This is a hit. I am happy with that. I'm doing this again. And this was the first time I ever tried it. And it was really all based on me finding the green chilies available at the grocery store, jarred. And after doing some research, I'm like, I could have done this with Anaheims or something else. But these hatch chilies are spicy and I like it. It's got a good mix of, it's kind of like your normal stew, but it's not tomatoey. Although I did put some tomatoes in it. You can't see them because they've kind of disappeared. It's got kind of a green tinge to it from the peppers. The potatoes are not overly done. They're just they're good and soft. The meat is in good shape. From a perspective of it's soft, but they're still kind of not huge chunks, but I would say perfectly sized chunks. It's just really a warming stew. So highly recommend it. Give us a try. I'll put Hank's recipe in. Just know that I've deviated a little bit. If you kind of follow along, you can kind of tell the things I did. And I would encourage you, just like I was thinking today of the reference to Walt Whitman's statement of be curious, not judgmental, was, from the Ted Lasso episode. Be curious and not judgmental about recipes. Try new things and just know that sometimes things aren't going to work out, and that's okay. You're learning. Now, I understand that it's not cool if it's for a dinner party, but if it's for you and your spouse and you try something, it didn't work out, get an emergency Domino's pizza and learn from your mistakes. But, this is the only way that we do learn is from trying new things. So completely new stew recipe that I've never tried before. Turned out very well, and I knew it probably would because it was a Hank Shaw basis recipe, and the things that I did added to it were not crazy. But very pleased with it. I hope you'll give it a try. I hope that you will try new things, branch out, and utilize your wild game. Help people understand that wild game isn't gamey and that it has a great taste to it. It just may not be what they're used to. But they can appreciate the flavors that are in that profile. So let's stop wild game waste together, and I hope that we'll all become better wild game cooks. Thank you, and good night.